So it is the beginning of February as I'm recording this, and I've been noticing something interesting lately. It seems that almost everyone I talk to had their pain flare up or spike during the month of January. Either they had a full-blown flare up during the month of January, it started in January, or it's still going on even now into February. And I've been noticing this with clients, with people that I've been talking to, people on social media, even friends, people in my church have had pain flare up sometime in January, which is actually pretty surprising to me because I really expected more of the flare ups to happen during the holiday season, like during the holidays, right? With so much going on, you really would expect pain to flare up in the middle of all that, which I think for many is still true. But like I said, it really seems like there's this wave of flare-ups happening after the holidays, specifically in January. And so I wanted to share that I've noticed that because if you've experienced flares during this time, this might make it seem a little less strange, a little more normal, quote unquote normal. Like maybe, it's not something that you did wrong or that you were missing something and that it's just the season that we're in. And so I wanted to share my theory as to why these flare-ups might be happening at this time. And also, I just wanted to share, just from my experience, what I've observed as the most likely times when flare-ups will happen. And I believe this is important because when pain flares up, it is terrifying, right? It is very stressful. It is very anxiety provoking. It makes you question everything. It feels like you're right back where you started and that you've lost any progress that you've made. And you're flooded with negative thoughts and negative emotions. What did I do wrong? What if this never goes away? I can't live the rest of my life like this. If it's this bad now in my 40s, how bad is it going to get? Is it going to get worse as I get older? And it's really hard to pinpoint one thing that caused a flare up, like one trigger that caused the flare up a lot of the time. And you can't really beat yourself up over it. And it can be really just a terrifying period of time. But if you can sort of anticipate these pain flares or expect them, so to speak, it can make them feel less threatening. It can make them feel like, okay, yep, I saw that coming. It's not that bad. It's not that I did something wrong. And I can see to some extent what caused it. And this doesn't have to be forever. I think it's far less terrifying if you can expect or anticipate these types of flare-ups. And so I'm not saying that we need to expect them and thus it becomes the reality, like the expectation becomes the reality. That's not what I'm saying. But I believe if you know the signs, you know the things that are most likely to cause flare-ups, and you can anticipate them and you can prepare for them, you can essentially lessen the blow. So I want to get into this. First, let's talk about what could be happening here with January. Okay. First of all, right, for a lot of folks, their pain doesn't necessarily get worse during the activity, but it comes on after the fact, like hours, sometimes even days later. It's this delayed onset of pain. You do too much and then you pay for it later in pain. And I think in a sense, I think the same kind of thing is happening with all these flare-ups that are happening in January. I think during the holiday season, there's so much going on, right? You're busy, you're entertaining, you're traveling, you're baking and wrapping presents, and you have holiday parties to attend. There's all this stuff going on, and it doesn't catch up to you, or really the pain doesn't flare up until all of the craziness kind of calms down. And once things start to quiet down, that's when the pain spikes up. It's like your body was just holding it all together until you had a chance to stop. And once you do, everything catches up. But the way I see it is there's more to it than just this post-holiday crash. I believe that these flare-ups happening in January are even more significant for several other reasons. The most obvious and significant other reason is because of the weather. The cold weather really influences our pain pathways and influences our sensitivity level. Okay. So if you have overactive pain pathways and your pain system is sensitive, your nerves can respond to changes in temperature and they can fire when they detect significant changes in weather. And so for a lot of folks, they are very sensitive to cold weather in particular. But this can go either way, right? Some people are sensitive to cold, some are more sensitive to hot weather, some people are sensitive to changes in humidity. Some are more sensitive to even changes in barometric pressure. So, like when it's going to rain or thunderstorm, right? So, when you combine the post holiday slowdown plus the impact of cold weather, it makes sense why January is such a rough month for so many people. Okay. But January isn't the only time when pain tends to spike. Okay, based on what I've seen with my clients, right, in my experience, there are a few other key times when flare-ups are most likely. Okay, probably the most significant one that I hear about a lot is traveling. Traveling is prime time for flare-ups. I don't know how many people have told me that they can't travel anymore. They're afraid to travel, or they know that if they travel, their pain is going to flare up. And we can immediately kind of think about all of the physical factors that go into traveling, right? Like having to walk around the airport and carry all your luggage, or sit in the car for a long period of time, or sit on an airplane for a long period of time, right? You're sleeping in a different bed. You're having to stand and walk or climb stairs a lot more than you're used to in your day-to-day life. So, yes, there is quite a bit more physical stuff going on during travel, but there's also the mental stress with travel that is also so difficult on our pain system. So, like worrying about what kind of chairs they're going to be there, worrying about, if you're going to be able to sit down or stand up, worrying about the pain flaring up and ruining your trip and how that will affect everybody that you're with. Even leading up to traveling, there's so much stress that goes into the planning for the trip itself, like the logistics, like how are we going to do that? How are we going to make it happen? And then, of course, the packing, right? There's so much to think about with the packing, and all of that planning and packing I would say it's 10 times harder and more stressful when you have pain, because now you have to think about, oh, should I pack my heating pads? Oh, should I pack my supplements? Oh, should I pack my pillows? Am I going to have to ask my doctor for more prescription medications? Am I going to be able to sit on that airplane? Do I have to ask the flight attendant for special treatment? Like, traveling for a lot of reasons is prime time for flaring up. And I tell all my clients in the chronic pain breakup method, like, if you're traveling, then we need to be prepared and be proactive and have a plan if it flares, and know that if it does flare, we were expecting it, right? You were ready for it. You were prepared, right? So traveling, yes. Next to traveling is changes in routine or changes in time. So there's obviously some overlap here with traveling, because if you're traveling to a different time zone, right, that's going to change your sleep, that's going to change your circadian rhythm, that's going to change your entire normal routine. But also, at least here in the US, we have our daylight savings time. So twice a year, we change our clocks, and for the most part, we don't think that that 1 hour is really that big of a deal, but it does impact us probably more than we think. So time changes can be a potential time for flare-ups, but also any time or season where our routines are thrown off. Okay. So for example, during the school year, we're used to our normal routines. And then when summer comes around and your kids are home from school, your routine is completely thrown off. Okay, let's say you have visitors that are staying with you, your routine gets thrown off. You're not eating your normal foods necessarily. You're not eating at the same times of day. You're not going to bed at the same time of day. You don't have the same bedtime routine, right? And another really significant example that affected a lot of people in terms of throwing off our routines was the pandemic. When we were all shut down, for so many of us, our normal routines were completely thrown off. Not only was that a very stressful time for all of us, but our routines were thrown off. A lot of us had a rhythm of going to work or going to the gym, and then all of a sudden we were completely shut down, right? And actually, speaking of pandemics, getting sick can really throw off your rhythm. You could be in a great routine, and then all of a sudden you get sick and everything is completely thrown off. And actually, while I'm mentioning sickness, of course, sickness or getting sick can absolutely be a time where pain flares, not just because it throws off your routines, but because you're physically fighting an infection. Okay, of course, your protective mechanisms are going to ramp up, and thus the sensitivity of your pain system is going to ramp up. And also, while I'm on this topic of being sick, I think it's also important to mention how many people, and I don't think this gets talked about enough, how many people have either had their symptoms flare up and get worse after having COVID or some other viral infection, or their symptoms were brought on either by the COVID virus itself or even the COVID vaccine. And I don't know at this point if our medical system has become more accepting that long COVID is a thing, because I know for a period of time there was a lot of debate and discussion like it wasn't real. But let me just say, I've spoken to way too many people who had their pain flare up after having COVID or even the COVID vaccine, along with other symptoms as well, not just pain. It is a real thing. In fact, any viral infection, the flu, a cold, can and does ramp up your body's protective mechanisms, including making those pain pathways more sensitive and more reactive. Okay. Okay. So, the next really big time for flares is during the holidays. Again, because of all the physical things that are going on, your routines are getting thrown off, the weather is cold, oftentimes it involves traveling, sometimes it involves visiting with family members who have the most well-intentioned advice, right? And oftentimes for some people, the holiday season brings up a lot of negative emotions for many different reasons. So, anytime we approach the holiday season, be aware of pain flares, right? I always recommend that my clients be proactive during those times so that they can get through it and enjoy it. Okay. So, the last but not least, I guess, most common time for flare ups that I'll mention is significant life changes. So, for example, going through job changes or job loss or loss of a loved one or going through a divorce or getting married or your kid going off to college. Or maybe you have a new family member, right? Maybe having a baby or moving, right? Like all of these significant life changes, whether they're positive ones or that they're not so positive, they can really affect your physiology and impact the amount of pain that you feel. So these are, from what I've seen in my experience, the most likely times that flare-ups happen. If something like this is going on in your life, I can almost predict that the flares happen. And it wouldn't surprise me if they happen during those times. And so, if you have chronic pain and you get flare ups, and of course, not everybody gets flare ups in this sense, but these are the times to be aware of, to be cognizant of, and to be prepared for, because there are things that you can do to prepare and be ready to lessen the blow that if it does happen, you're not completely caught off guard and you're not sitting there, beating yourself up over it. Okay. If you experience flare ups, especially during times like these, please don't beat yourself up over it. It's not that you did something wrong. It's not that you're back at square one and all of your progress is lost. It does not mean that your progress is lost. Flare ups are part of this process, the recovery process. But when you can expect them and prepare for them, they become less terrifying. I'm not going to say that they're not terrifying still, but they become less terrifying. You can tell yourself, okay, I saw this one coming. Like, I know what's happening. I know that this is temporary. So, as we're heading into the middle of February, the end of February, if you had a rough January, I hope that this helps you to kind of put things into perspective. And moving forward, whenever you're facing one of these big transitions, whether it's travel or change in routine or something else, you can be proactive and have a plan. And if you're looking for more guidance on managing your pain flares and breaking free from that cycle of chronic pain, know that this is what I do with my clients inside the chronic pain breakup method. And if you want expert help and the proven step-by-step plan that works to address your overactive pain pathways and help you lower the frequency and duration and intensity of your pain flares and lower the overall baseline of your pain and sensitivity of your pain system, then let's have a conversation. We'll talk about your pain. We'll talk about everything that you've tried, and we'll make sure that this is the right fit for you. So go ahead and book your call. Let's have that conversation. I look forward to chatting with you soon, and I hope that this episode has been helpful. I'd love to hear from you. Send me a message, share your thoughts. Let me know if your pain actually did flare up in January and what other times of year or other circumstances tend to be the toughest for you. All right. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next time.